Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Governance and Audit Committee of the 10th of April 2024. Just to let individuals know that we have got an IT issue at the moment, so I can't see people who are at the meeting, and obviously I'm not able to see the hands going up, but Jeremy sitting alongside is able to do so. He'll prompt me when people are wanting to speak that are not in the room. Apologies for that. If we can go to the agenda and ask for apologies for absence, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillors Mike Lewis and Mike White, and from Julie Davis.
I'm not sure if Gordon Anderson, the lay member, is joining or not at the moment, so we may have to note his apologies later on in the course of the afternoon. If we go to agenda item 2, please, the disclosure of interests. Any disclosures in the room? None in the room. Any hands up, Jeremy, on the... No. So there are no disclosures of interest. We can move to agenda item 3, which are the minutes of the meeting of the 28th of February. If we can go through them page by page for accuracy, please. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. Can I ask for hands up for accuracy of the minutes? Councillor Paxton and Michael in the room. Thank you. They're accurate reflection of the meeting. If we can move on to the minutes from the 14th. Sorry, the minutes of the 14th of March as well are the next ones. Pages 1, 2, and 3. If they're an accurate reflection, I can have hands up for. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Michael Locke has given. Okay, so those minutes are okay as well. We can move then on to agenda item 4, which is the internal audit strategy and draft plan 24-25. If I could welcome the Chief Auditor, Simon Hawkins, to the meeting, and if you can ask Simon to go through the report in summary, assuming that we've read the report, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, this is the internal audit strategy and draft audit plan for 24-25. The standards require the plan to be accompanied by sort of a guidance document as to how we deliver the audit plan, which is the strategy in Appendix 1. The key things to review for this committee is in Appendix 2 and Appendix 3, which is the summary plan and the more detailed audit plan for 24-25. And just to note, there are a few obvious omissions from the plan. The first one is in relation to the new computer system Fusion that the council has just implemented. That's not been included in the plan primarily because Audit Wales are currently going to undertake their own review of the system this month. And the second one is in relation to financial stability. I know Ben has raised budgetary concerns with this committee in the past. And again, Audit Wales are going to be doing a piece of work on that in this month as well. So, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on the actual strategy and the plan itself.
Thank you, Simon. Are there any questions in the room? David?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things, Simon, really, on page 13, paragraph 1.6 and 1.7. Excuse me. It was just, I appreciate I've only been in the committee 12 months, but I just wondered in regard to sickness absence, the profile of the staff and everything. Is this a year-on-year issue in regards to departments obviously having an impact on capacity and everything else? Just your observations, really. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. Historically, there's not been such an issue with staff sickness in the team. We have seen over the last couple of years repeated sickness, but primarily long-term sickness of a few members of staff, so not necessarily widespread sickness across the team. We have had a few long-term sickness over the last 12 and 18 months. It is ongoing as it stands, which is why I've increased the sickness provision in the plan for 24-25. So I am aware of possible sickness continuing into 24-25. I think it is something we see across the organisation, not just an internal audit. Unfortunately, that sickness is increasing. We are on top of it, and I have increased the provision for that going forward.
Thanks for that. Just another one, just on page 20, paragraph 5. You mentioned there about this, apart from the internal audit function within a department, you talk about a consultancy service. And I just wondered, is there a particular split or a dedicated time for this consultancy service, and how that maybe impacts on the main core function of the internal audit department?
Thanks, David. Yeah, the consultancy side is ad hoc, really. So it's as and when CMT or corporate management team ask us to do a piece of work or advisory work. It's not part of the day-to-day operations of the team. The core function is the basic plan as presented to the committee today. But if we are asked to do any advisory work or consultancy work, then we will bring that to the committee to advise them of that. So if that does have an impact on the plan, we will make you aware of that. But we do have that service available should we need it.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you.
So Leslie Walton, I think, is wanting to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I want to check about the feedback we're going to get in future for moderate or limited reports. In 8.2, it actually says that the report will include brief details of the audit findings. I'm a bit concerned if it is going to be brief. I think one of the big reasons that this committee exists is to make sure not that we pick up on areas where they're not working as well as they should, but to be able to support them as well. If we don't know enough about why there was a moderate or limited, I'm not sure we can actually fulfill that duty. So maybe you can reassure me, but it strikes me it looks like we're no longer going to get a full report fed back to this committee, but I might be wrong. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Yeah, I think members will be reminded of the fact that there was a change suggested in the last quarterly report, which has been reversed. So going forward, the quarterly monitoring report will have a summary of the moderate reports that have been issued in that quarter. What I tend to report on is primarily the high risk and medium risk recommendations, which are the key issues really that sort of guide that moderate or limited assurance rating. The low risk and good practice don't really tend to influence that unless they're a great number or they're repeated recommendations. So Councillor Walton, I can assure you that any detail that will come to the committee will be enough for you to have a good feel of the key issues on any moderate or limited reports going forward. There are some in Q4, and the Q4 report is due in June, I believe, or July, when the next meeting is. And again, I have included those summaries in those reports. So if at that point you feel there isn't enough detail, Councillor Walton, I'm happy to elaborate going forward. But I think there will be enough in there for members to get a good feel of the key issues that face those areas.
Okay, that's good. Can I just go one step further? Are we still going to be in a position where if we feel it's necessary, we can invite officers to a follow-up meeting? Which is what we agreed. I know this is a few years ago now, but I think that's important. That option is there. We might not want to, but I think we need to have that option. Thanks. Yeah,
I believe so, Councillor Walton. I assume, like in previous years, officers will attend when the quarterly report is presented to update members on any issues that are raised. And again, you're also able to call in officers at a particular meeting later on to update on progress and addressing those issues as happened in the past. So yeah, I think that's the best way forward and has been best practice in the past, Councillor Walton.
If I could come in, if I could come in also, Councillor Walton, then I will encourage officers to attend if we think that's necessary for any critical reports. And in addition to that, I get copies of the full reports from Simon. And if I think it's necessary and if the members want to request those reports, I'm happy to circulate those reports with the approval of Simon and Ben and Ness. But obviously the full reports will be for information to the members only and not for wider circulation. Is that okay, Councillor Walton?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Thanks.
Yeah. Are there any other questions for Simon? No? If I could just pick up on a point I've discussed with Simon prior to the meeting, and that's the noting that the 2 audit reviews that are going to be undertaken by Audit Wales, both key pieces of work that we will need to see coming back in a future meeting, both on the Oracle Fusion and financial stability. So thank you for liaising with Audit Wales on that, Simon. It's quite right, because I think they've got the technical expertise within their resource to do those computer related pieces of work. And in addition, I think it would be amiss of me not to comment on the increase in the vacancy numbers and the sickness numbers, because the 1,046 days there are heading towards half of the audit resource. I know it's not a position that you wish to find yourself in, with high levels of sickness coupled with vacancies as well. But I'm assured that the work that you're undertaking with HR and the senior managers of the council, that you're aiming to rectify that as a matter of your priority, really. But as it stands, you know, it's increasing to nearly 50% of the resource that's been lost due to vacancies and the like. And then obviously for the 2024 period, if that worsens, then it may put at risk you being able to give an opinion at the year end in March 2025. So I think it's for noting at this moment in time that that risk is still inherent in the current position, but you're doing everything that you possibly can. Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick question, really. The Welsh audits, are they just Swansea specific, or are they across Wales?
I believe the Fusion one is obviously Swansea specific. Yeah, the budget on financial stability is across Wales review, I believe, as far as I'm aware. Ben and Ness might be able to expand further on that, but I believe it is Swansea review, but looking at the whole of Wales as a whole for comparators and that sort of, yeah.
It's a regular piece of work that Audit Wales does every couple of years.
Is that okay, Councillor Paxton?
Okay. If there are no other questions, then we've been asked to review the internal audit strategy and the draft annual plan. But Simon's informed me there are a couple of changes needed to this plan, which has been raised at the last CMT meeting. So we will, I don't think we need to approve this plan at this moment in time, because it'll be coming back to us after those changes have been made. So I don't know if that's satisfactory, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Because of the timing of the agenda for this meeting, obviously this plan went to CMT last week. There were a few amendments suggested by CMT at that point. Just to make the members aware, there are 10 to 12 ongoing audits on the current year's plan, previous year's plan, sorry, that I also need to build into this to be finalised in 24-25. So the view is to bring this back to CMT on the 8th of May, I believe. So then I'll bring a revised version back to the committee in the July meeting, or June or July meeting.
You know, I would just add that this is a living document, so the plan can change during the course of the year. I still believe it's a very ambitious plan with the current resource, because you've got 116 audits planned within the year. But we'll just have to see how that goes, and keep a mindful check on it every quarter as a minimum.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There are a number of contingency days built into the plan, and obviously if anything does crop up in the year, as you say, this is a living document, so I'll make members aware of any significant changes I need to build in as and when throughout the year, because things might crop up that we need to investigate further. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Simon, for that. And so, Jeremy, if it's okay, we want just to note it at this moment in time, and we can approve it at a subsequent meeting when it's amended. If we can move to agenda item 5 again, which is the internal audit charter, which we need to approve. Again, I'll invite Simon, but before doing so, I would just inform the Governance and Audit Committee members that there will be substantive updates to this strategy, this document, this charter, probably towards the end of 2024, early 2025, with the changes to the global standards that are due to come in. But the UK Public Sector Internal Audit Standards Advisory Board are currently looking at the global standards to see if there are any changes need to be made before they're actually implemented as the global across the board. So we need to bring this back to the table, probably for an update in December of 2024 to see where we are. Yeah. So if I could ask you to introduce this paper then.
Yes, thanks, Chair. As you mentioned, we are currently awaiting further guidance on how the global standards will be interpreted in a public sector setting. Again, that's due to be implemented in January 2025, I believe. So I'm happy to bring back an updated version of this as and when we are in a position to update it based on those revised guidelines. So yeah, this came the charter came to the committee back in October 2023, if you remember. Following our peer review, some minor amendments were suggested to the charter at that point. Very minor ones in relation to qualifications of myself and consultancy work of the team. Those were implemented and the revised version was brought back to the committee in October. So this is not a new document for members to see. It's not been changed since then. It just has to come back to the committee on an annual basis for review and approval, basically, for the standards. So it's, again, it's not new, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any questions in the room? David?
Thanks, Chair. Just on the code of ethics, I'm looking at page 53 and the competency, paragraph 4, competency. Obviously, it's very descriptive about knowledge, skills, and experience, etc., and obviously mentions the various parts there, and also regarding the standards that's been mentioned on a global basis that are coming in. I just wondered if it needs an additional sub-paragraph there about the actual minimal competencies required by staff working in the internal audit department, whether that should be more specific as opposed to just a descriptive element there. Just value a comment on that, really.
If I could come in there before you comment, I think at paragraph 8.1, it talks about the internal audit resource there. And I would just ask you to consider making an amendment to include the qualification profiles of the individual auditors. So if you've got qualified accountants or, you're qualified yourself, but what other qualifications are sitting within that team, just to give assurance that the competency factors are sufficient for the team.
Yeah, thanks both. I would probably advise putting that information, as you say, Chair, in section 8 of the main body of the report. I'm not sure if we would need to put it in the competency bit, but I'm happy to put a paragraph in there to say minimum experience and qualification.
Yeah.
I'm happy to amend both either way. It's not an issue.
As long as it's in 8.1 for me.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it's just a good, as you review, I think it's a good sort of reference in regard to competency and qualification, everything else with competency particularly, but also obviously in this next 12 months, we may see something more specific.
Yeah.
In that global document,
Yeah, as you say, that things may change towards the end of the year, but obviously I'm happy to add something in for the next time, or maybe wait until this time next year to get it approved again.
I'd like it to go in now
before we. And a revised version come back to the committee. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Are there any hands up online? Okay, then we're asked to approve this one, so we need to take a vote on this one. I would recommend that we approve it subject to the inclusion of the profile of qualifications, paragraph 8.1. So if that can be done, then I'm happy to approve that.
And the addition in section 4 as well. Yeah. I'll do the both of them. That's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we go through the vote, Jeremy? Yeah.
Okay, Gordon, Councillor Adam Davis. Councillor Adam Davis?
Sorry, 4.
It's 4. Okay, thank you. Councillor Paxton Hood Williams.
4.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yes, 4.
Councillor Michael Locke.
4.
Chair.
4.
Councillor Sam Pritchard. You there? No. David Roberts.
4.
Councillor Leslie Walton.
4.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Then we can move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6. And that's the updated internal control environment, Director of Corporate Services. Ness, can I welcome you to the meeting, and if you could go through the paper for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is a report that we produce for committee annually, setting out the internal control environment for my directorate, that is Corporate Services. So it's a lengthy report. It covers a lot of ground, but in section 1.3 sets out the sort of key functions that are covered by the directorate. Section 1.4 sets out the insurance framework elements that are relevant, and 1.5 the key elements of our arrangements for internal control. So just touching on some of those in a bit more detail. First of all, looking at risk management and business continuity. So within the directorate, we adhere to the risk management framework and policy, and all risks that are managed either at a directorate level, corporate service or project level are articulated in the risk register. And these are reviewed on a monthly basis by officers, and the risk register is updated. They're also then reviewed at our monthly directorate management team stroke performance and finance management meeting. And so we can have a discussion there about whether those risks need to be escalated, whether control measures need to be adjusted, and we can make appropriate changes to the register in that way. During 23-24, as at the 29th of February, you'll see in paragraph 2.4 the changes to the risks within the directorate, so I won't go through those in detail. Paragraph 3 or section 3 relates to performance management, and just to recognise that Corporate Services Directorate is responsible for the corporate performance planning and performance arrangements within the council, and has made some improvements in this financial year, with particular reference to the development of the in-phase system. So now our corporate plan and corporate performance, again, reporting against that plan, are held within an online software, which enables for individual heads of service and directors to input information onto the system. In particular, for us at a corporate level, we are responsible within corporate services for the transformation or key elements of the transformation and financial resilience wellbeing objective, and that then feeds down through into our directorate plans and service plans. Section 3.5 shows the key performance indicators that each service is monitoring within corporate services, and so you can see there's a range of indicators there for each of my services. Section 4 looks at performance reviews and highlights that myself and my heads of service all have had clear personal objectives set for 23-24, and we monitor those at every one-to-one meeting once a month. All staff have had an annual appraisal. In this report, actually, in section 4.2, we highlight that more than 80% of employees' goals were uploaded into Fusion, but I can update committee that that figure has now increased to 96% by the end of the financial year. And the residual 4% relates to individuals who are either absent due to maternity leave or secondment or some other reason. So in other words, every member of my directorate has had a formal appraisal this year. And again, on mandatory training, the figure there quoted 70 to 80% of director employees have completed all mandatory courses. That figure has also increased slightly, and so is now at around 80%. And those numbers are continuing to increase. Section 5 looks at planning and decision making, and confirms that we have robust arrangements in place within the directorate for planning and decision making. So we have service plans, 4 service plans within the directorate for 22 2023 to 24, sorry, tripping over my words. And those include the objectives for the service that link to the corporate plan, but also objectives that are more specific to the service improvement, identifying key success measures and the performance indicators which I referenced previously. We have, within the Directorate, continued to deliver the Council's transformation plan, and in particular within my Directorate, the Digital Transformation Programme and the Workforce Transformation Programme. And we've also, as I said, done some strengthening of our performance management a framework throughout the year, particularly looking at how we embed self-assessment throughout the year in terms of performance management and reporting. But also we've aligned more clearly the corporate plan with our medium-term financial plan and with our corporate transformation plan. We're also responsible in my Directorate for the Council's role within the Public Service Board, Swansea's Public Service Board. And so we have worked with our local partners to develop an annual action plan for the delivery of that wellbeing plan, and have ensured that we've delivered on those areas that we have led on. Section 6 of the report deals with budget and resources management, and I can confirm there are robust mechanisms in place to deliver the budget within corporate services and effective budget monitoring and control, which includes monthly meeting between our heads of service and the principal accountant, and with delegated budget holders, and then a review of the Directorate's financial position at every DMT PFM, and also at the monthly one-to-one meetings between myself and my heads of service. As at the latest position in terms of the current financial year indicates that the Directorate will be coming in with a small underspend this year. In line, section 6.2 identifies that the sort of key areas that we look at in our PFM and DMT meetings monthly, and to advise the committee that since this report was written, we have as a leadership team reviewed the DMT PFM terms of reference across the council, and we've updated those to ensure that we're covering all areas of corporate governance that you would expect to see. So in terms of the final point on budget is that we have delivered 91% of our savings for this year recurrently, and the remaining 9% in year, which means that we've delivered it for this year, but we still need to deliver the recurrent saving next year. And that's predominantly because the saving has been slightly delayed because of factors beyond our control, but that will be then in place from this new financial year. In terms of fraud and financial impropriety, the Directorate's arrangements in respect of that are set out in section 7, and I can confirm there have been no instances of fraud, bribery or corruption detected within or by the Directorate in the financial year. Section 8 deals with compliance with policies, rules and regulatory requirements, and I can confirm we have robust systems and processes in place to ensure compliance with those. In 2023-24, all procurement that was undertaken within the Directorate was compliant, and also the Directorate is responsible for HR policies, and we have undertaken a programme of reviewing and updating those policies during 23-24. There's more to do. Further policies will be reviewed during this current financial year now. The Directorate is also responsible for information governance, and we have a meeting of a board that oversees the management of that function, which meets every other month. And in this financial year, we have developed a Microsoft 365 acceptable use policy, and that is in the process of formal approval. Legal and democratic services clearly plays a fundamental role in ensuring our compliance with the Constitution and legislation, and also manages the council business arrangements. There are further examples within section 8 of other elements within the Directorate, but in terms of internal audit during 23-24, as of the 15th of February, we had a total of 17 internal audit reviews, and all of those that had reported were either providing substantial or high levels of opinion. The Directorate oversees the relationship with Audit Wales, and you will have seen this year that we've introduced the tracker for governance and audit so that you can see the speed at which, or the pace at which, we're implementing any recommendations that come out of their work. And then in terms of ongoing compliance during the year, we have within our DMT PFM agendas an opportunity to identify whether there are any issues of non-compliance, and heads of service we can discuss and ensure that we are addressing those, or discussing how to comply with things that come up during the year, such as the hospitality register. But there were no areas of non-compliance during 23-24. Programme and project assurance. There are a number of key programmes within corporate services, all of which have appropriate governance arrangements in place. I've already mentioned the digital transformation and workforce transformation programmes. They both have governance boards in place, as does the Oracle Fusion project and the human rights and strategic equalities. There are governance boards in place for both of those. I have most recently established a project around dealing with tackling the aged debt that the council is, so we are working very hard to clear that aged debt situation that we have discussed in this committee previously. So there is structured programme project management methodologies also applied within digital services to business as usual projects where they are significant as well. Section 10, in terms of internal controls, the corporate services has an effective internal control framework, and the key elements of that are set out at 10.2. All individuals within the Directorate have a clear job description and have clear processes around delegations and procedure rules contained within the Constitution. We have identified as a DMT the need to ensure that all our service managers understand the finance procurement rules, the contract procurement rules, and also the accounting instructions. And so that is something which is being cascaded at the moment. In terms of internal controls compliance, 10.6 shows the areas that or the elements that we provide assurance through, the mechanisms through which we provide assurance on those points. Section 11 deals with data security. We do manage a high level of personal information, and we do report any data breaches immediately to the IGU. And there are no significant issues that were raised within 2023-4. Partnership and collaboration governance. As I said, we are responsible for the Public Service Board, which is a joint committee, and which this committee has had reports on throughout the year in terms of our corporate partnership arrangements. The board meets formally 4 times a year, 3 times a year, and informally 3 times a year, and we manage that. We provide the Secretariat an administrative role to support that board. In terms of the only final element to raise is the impact assessment, integrated impact assessment implications, which are set out in paragraph 13. There is this is only for information report. There is no requirement to screen for an IIA, and the appendices are included are the corporate risks for the Directorate and also our risk assurance map. Sorry, that took quite a while. It was a long report.
Thank you, Ness. Thank you, Ness, for a very comprehensive report. Any questions from those not in the room? Hands up. Any questions from individuals? David?
Hi, Ness. Thanks, Chair. Just regard paragraph 4.2 and 5.2, it's very much just an observation, really, and just a thematic question, really, 4.2 and 5.2, where you mentioned about Oracle and the implementation of that since, I think, about 12 plus months now. I just wonder, obviously, you've highlighted there's some benefits in regard to staff appraisal and also in regard to account users. I just wonder, going forward in 24-25, can we expect to see some quantification of efficiencies and benefits from the system now, once we're beyond the implementation phase, whether we can actually put that into some sort of efficiencies in future reports. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yes, we have a benefits tracker for the Oracle Fusion project, where we set out at the beginning what the intended benefits of moving to this system would be. And so we are able to then say, have we actually achieved those? As you've said, the system went live in April, so a year ago. But going live and embedding and ensuring everything's working as it should, as you say, is an ongoing process. And we have had a health check report undertaken by our new support partner de Novo, which has recognised that the system is sound, but there are and have been some challenges along the way, which we've discussed in committee before, primarily in relation to our interfaces. So yes, absolutely is the answer. In future, we'll be able to demonstrate the benefits, or at least be able to show the progress being made towards those benefits. They don't have necessarily fixed timelines or deadlines on them for demonstrating that, but we will be able to give you that information in future reports.
It was just basically over the next 12 months, really,
Yeah.
in when we get reports, when we would expect to see, obviously a year from now will be two plus years in, just over this next 12 months, if we're able to see that, really.
Yeah, and I think we certainly will. I think there will be areas where we'll be able to see very tangible benefits, and there will be other areas that are we're still developing in order to really get the most out of that system, out of that new system.
Thank you, Ness. Thank you.
Any questions from anyone out of the room? No. Any further questions from those? If I could just pick up a similar point to David, really. I mean, we're 12 months in now, and I'm just looking to see if we've got any known post-implementation issues that have emerged. I recall at a previous meeting, there was some functionality which was resulting in manual workarounds to get the systems doing what they want to do. There was one example given around the VAT field not being mandatory, and there were other, examples given at that time. I'm just wondering, is there still an issue of functionality that is causing additional work whilst we're in this phase? And, how significant is that really?
So there are a couple of different sort of aspects to it. So there are some elements of work that is still or has been required around the interfaces between the Fusion system and other council systems that we operate. And in some cases, while the permanent solution to that interface was being developed, we've had to put in manual workarounds to ensure that the business was able to continue. In other areas, because in the example that you gave around the VAT field, Chair, is where Oracle, which is a global system, has not provided that functionality, we are having to raise change requests with Oracle to actually have the system changed itself, rather than it be something that we can do locally. So there are a couple of examples of that as well. And I think, the thing to sort of recognize is that this system is a really, it's a really big and complex system. And so the health check has been a really important process for us. And the health check is saying that the system is sound and is operating as it should, but there are opportunities for improving the efficiency of the way some of that functionality is working. And there are also further developments that we need to make. And some of those interface issues, while they're being resolved, have resulted in manual workarounds. Okay, that's clear.
Does that pose a risk to any particular systems that we need to be aware of? So, is there anything with the main accounting system or the main payroll systems that are affected by that workaround?
The
interface?
So if we look at, we have raised on the corporate risk register a risk around Oracle Fusion interfaces, because we do have a couple of those issues that are still being worked around. We're confident that the workarounds mean that we don't have a risk, but we do need to have the permanent solution in place, which is why at the moment it's on the corporate risk register as saying until those permanent things are in place, we need to recognise that there still does remain a risk. But from a day-to-day operational point of view, we are not concerned that those manual workarounds aren't sufficient.
Okay.
I hope that's clear.
Okay, so there's no red flags at the moment that we're going to have issues, or Ben will be reporting issues to us that they can't reconcile any of the systems that you're.
No, I think we will see as the audit report comes in that there have been challenges through the year, but at the moment, as at this point, those significant challenges around the interfaces are more or less resolved.
Okay, if you can keep the committee up to date with that, because I think it's something that I'm quite nervous around at the moment. And I don't know if there are any other comments anyone wishes to make. Paxton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question, really. Obviously, there's a whole range and gamut, I guess, of systems within the council. And if I talk about Wix or something of that nature with the social services one, is there any sort of interface between the two systems and that enable data to pass from one to the other where it's appropriate so to do? And are there any other systems as well?
There are a number of systems that interface with Fusion. So, and they range from things, for example, like the school system, SIMS, to there'll be smaller pieces of software that different directorates are using for different purposes, and all of those need to interface. If we look at on revenues and benefits side, there'll be the system there and how that integrates. And so that's why I'm saying it's that layer of how the two systems, like the clutch on your car, I guess. How do you make sure that those systems are talking to each other properly? And that's the bit that has been a little bit challenging. But the system itself is working as it should.
So basically what you're saying, it can be the interface that is difficult to get it right, is it? Thank you.
David?
Yeah, just picking up on the conversation between the chair and Councillor Paxton, really. I suppose the success of this will be the lessening of the double handling, really, because you're in a transition. You're obviously using one system and you're using historical systems. So the double handling for staff in regard to time and everything, I suppose the lessening of that is an indicator that the system is becoming more successful. Would that be a fair comment?
The system, we're not running two systems. We're only running the one system, the new system. So it's more that where we've identified that perhaps through the design phase, we haven't made it as streamlined as it possibly could be, that we now need to improve that so that we're getting the efficiency that we want. And that's what I'm saying. This is an incredibly complex and large system. And if you think of every single process and every service that's involved, you can see that through that process of design and implementation, there will be areas where we haven't got it quite right. But fundamentally, the system is working as it should, but we can do more to make those processes smoother and more efficient.
Okay. If there are no more questions on that, no, none from the thing. I think we've just been asked to note the contents of the report in this instance. I would just want to make a final comment really on paragraph 9.3 about the significant programs and projects. And I'm pleased to hear that there are governance boards in place around those big projects that you've got. And obviously, there's a key role for the scrutiny committees that are operating as well, which we know we place rely on the work of the scrutiny committees in that regard, and not to overlap any of the work of the governance and audit committee with that role as well. So, but I am comforted because those are big areas of work that we need to be assured that the right governance arrangements are working around those. But thank you, Ness. Thank you for a comprehensive report. If we can move on to Audit Wales. I'm not sure if we've got any Audit Wales. Matthew, please be with us, Matthew. If you'd like
Fernanda,
to.
good afternoon, Chair.
you'd like to take us through the summary report, please.
Yeah, of course. I won't keep you too long. This is a very high-level report just showing a summary of Audit Wales outputs this year since April 2023. So these have all been presented previously at the relevant scrutiny committees, which are then forwarded to Governance and Audit Committee for discussion. So members will have had a chance to look through completed work and discuss those. Just on pages 1 and 2, just set out background council services, and they also just remind members of the AGW duties, the audit of accounts, value for money work under the Public Audit Wales Act, work under the Sustainable Development Principle also as part of our duties under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Page 3 just gives a summary of accounts information. You'll be aware there were a few issues with the council presenting draft reports after the statutory deadline, and I know these have been discussed with the council and our financial audit colleagues, but resulted in an unqualified audit opinion being issued in March 2024. Page 4 just talks about our audit assurance and risk assessment work that's carried out throughout the year and the associated reports, and you'll see there's also specific thematic reviews that we've undertaken, and all the links to reports are there, which take you to our website with the relevant reports. Page 5 just gives an idea of ongoing work. So this, to remind members, includes 2 thematic reviews being undertaken. A couple were mentioned earlier. So the financial sustainability work, which will shortly be undertaken, and also a review into commissioning services. I believe unscheduled care is currently going through clearance with the council. And I know the fusion work referred to earlier in the internal audit item, that's part of financial audit work. So I don't have too much detail on that, but I know that's being undertaken as part of financial audit work. And I'll stop there. That's just a brief summary of our work throughout the year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. Are there any questions from anyone outside the room? Any questions from those inside? No. Thank you for this report. I've just got one question, really, and it's on the top of page 106 in the pack, Assurance and Risk Assessment Review. You talk about use of performance information. I don't know whether you'll be able to help on this one, Ness. And you found that performance information provided to senior leaders enable them to understand the service user perspective and the outcomes, but it's limited. The council's activities there is limited. Can you expand on that at all, Matthew or Ness, if you've got a comment?
Chair, you will be having a copy of that report in due course. I'm not sure, it was due to be discussed at scrutiny, I think, last month, but it was deferred. But basically, this report looked at specifically the type of information that we are able to gather from our service users on the quality of our services. And it found that while we do have some of that information in some areas of the council, it's an area for future development in other areas. And so it wasn't just about whether we collect it, it's about how you use that information and whether it is used to inform senior managers and members of the cabinet. And so as a consequence of that report, and we'll obviously talk about it in further detail in a future meeting, we have taken actions to try and garner more information from our residents in the form of a residence survey, which we have undertaken. And we've also, in reviewing our KPIs for 24-25, sought to identify more that will help us to be able to demonstrate that we've understood the service user perspective.
Okay then, so we look forward to receiving that report in that case. And similar point really on the springing forward workforce. You found the council has got a clear vision for workforce strengthened by its work with partners, but has not identified the resources required to deliver the strategy. Is that being addressed also now?
Thank you, Chair. It's an interesting reflection, because what in our transformation programme, that takes us right through to 5 years' time. But when we went to Cabinet for the first couple of years, investment for the first couple of years of the programme, And we had that identified. That investment has gone to workforce and to the digital programmes. And there's a recognition that there'll be a further conversation about what resources may be required for the final 3 years of that programme. And so that's what this report is commenting on. It's saying, although you've got the financial resources in place for the next 2 years, what happens then?
Beyond.
And we've recognised that, and we've said, that's part of our usual budget planning processes.
Okay. You do.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the same point, really, I suppose, really, because we've spoken about the workforce, about the ageing workforce in previous reports, the advancement of things like information technology, the efficiencies around that in regard to manpower, and obviously the advent of artificial intelligence as well on the horizon. And I suppose it's a question, really, what the workforce will look like in that 5-year time frame, and how much you actually, how you model it, I suppose, really, in essence, to the strategy, really. Because that's just an observation.
If I could come in, we are working from the HR service very closely with service areas to do more on the workforce planning element. So alongside service plans this year, we'll be expecting to see workforce plans as well. What that will do is we'll be able to then pull together one overall council workforce plan to say we're identifying in the next couple of years, this is where we think the workforce is going to go and look like, and how are we then going to, in HR, help support those service areas to deliver those transformation elements within their workforce. So yeah, we expect to see far more workforce planning in 24-25.
Okay. Yeah.
So then when we have that in place, that will inform the actions in the final 3 years of the strategy that we need to take. And that's when we can work out what resources we need to support that. Yeah. At the moment, it's too soon for us to be able to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Just a final point, Matthew. We requested previously for more information around your good practice spring event for the What Does Good Look Like? You indicated to me previously that May was the anticipated date. Has that been confirmed?
I did raise that, Chair. The last thing I heard was that was still being finalised, so I can ask again and then actually find out if that has been finalised. Apologies, I've been on leave for a couple of weeks, so I'm sure that's progressed since. So I will of course forward you the latest on that. That will of course come out through usual channels as well. So if you haven't seen anything, I'd expect something soon, but I will follow that up and get back to the committee, Chair.
Thank you so much, because I'm keen to attend that one. Ness?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on in the report, it refers to the update on the progress the Council is making around its transformation programme. And we had a letter from Audit Wales in October on that, making a number of suggestions. Just to advise the committee that we have had an internal audit review of the extent to which we've delivered on those suggestions, and that concluded that we have implemented all the suggestions made by Audit Wales back in October.
Okay. Thank you, Ness. If there are no more comments or questions, then can I thank you, Matthew, for joining us remotely and for your summary paper. And we note that. If we can now move on to agenda item 8, which is the absence management and employment of agency worker update report. Is this Rachel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report for committee then updates you on the position with sickness absence and the employment of agency workers. Previously, these have been separate agenda items, but perhaps given the causal link between the two, they're presented as one agenda item today. So in terms of the sickness absence, firstly, we are shortly to agree an audit outcome for 23-24, which will provide the updated position to the 2020-21 position. But this audit report was not quite complete in time for this meeting today. So we are expecting a outcome report and set of recommendations available for us for the next time that this item will appear on the agenda. In terms of the report, you'll see from paragraph 1.3 that the questions posed by committee members in the October meeting have been responded to in the report, with detail including around the number of days lost to accidents, occupational health shortages and agency workers engaged for more than 12 months. The breakdown that you'll see in the table there around the time lost due to industrial injury shows expected spikes in certain service areas, given the number of roles that the council employs in areas of work where there will be a requirement to either work outdoors in weathers, use machinery, moving and handling of people, etc. And whilst we don't yet have the verified full end of year absence figure for March or April to March 23 to 24, a snapshot of the end of February has been used within the report for the purposes of updating committee. And members, you'll see that the position is pretty stable when compared to the last year. So there hasn't really been very much variation in either an increase or a decrease in those absence levels. And this leads me to point out section 4 of the report to you, which goes into detail around the work that's been done this year on reviewing both the policy approach to managing absence and also the occupational health provision. So we've carried out a number of engagement sessions, including principle setting with trade union representatives, and we now have a firm proposal to work up in social partnership with them in the coming months for a new approach to managing absence. So we anticipate that will be finalised probably within a couple of months and a launch then later this year. Similarly, we have a number of recommendations to discuss with the Occupational Health Service to ensure that the way in which support is provided to the workforce, and section 5 covers some of these suggestions for you. So our proposals aim to improve the approach towards wellness in work, to expand and enhance flexibility around things such as reasonable adjustments, importantly, to reduce manager process burden and employee stress and anxiety over a sometimes tick box approach to a policy rather than a person-centred one, and to improve the wait times that we're seeing within access to occupational health services. So given that the absence levels have stayed pretty stable for some years without sign of reduction or improvement in attendance, our focus is now on questioning the value of the current policy approach and to make those changes I've just mentioned. Continuing with the current process is not bringing the improvement we would like to see. So it's timely to look at doing things in a different way and taking some proactive action to change that. Turning then to agency workers, you'll see section 6 and 7 of the report provides details on the last year spend rates. And whilst members will see an increase in agency spend, it's important to note that that is in line with inflationary staff cost rises. It's not necessarily additional usage. So this mirrors the position we see with sickness. We've had a stable year on both the absence and the agency side. At our last meeting in October, committee was interested to know about the number of agency workers placed with the council for more than 12 months, notably in the waste parks and cleansing service area. So the table at paragraph 7.7 shows the reduction in reliance on agency staff and the volume of vacancies that have been filled within waste collections. And we expect a similar piece of work to now take place within waste operations side of the service, and then that should show further reduction in the reliance on agency. We are about ready to conclude now the new agency contract with procurement colleagues, and communications will shortly be cascaded to managers. And that would be a really key opportunity for us to refresh and remind managers who utilise agency staff of their responsibilities. And we'll use the rollout of the contract as a helpful prompt to refresh that knowledge and understanding of appropriate ways of utilising agency staff. So to summarise, I would say that whilst there doesn't appear to be movement either way in regards to levels of absence or agency usage, the steps we're taking to make improvements in both of those areas are in train and are actively being pursued. And I hope then to be able to provide committee with a positive update later in the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That's a really good summary of where you are, and I'm really pleased that you are looking at it a total afresh, because you know the figures that we're seeing are not acceptable really, and on a year-on-year basis. Any questions, Paxton?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Table 2 on 3.2. I'm quite surprised to see that figure is high for education. We're used to seeing high figures in terms of social services. But why do we have any reason why a figure of 14% in education is as high as that?
We have in education a large number of staff that work within the cleaning and catering provision to schools. It's several hundreds members of staff, and of course with the kind of job role and duties that we see there working in the environments that they both do, we see high levels of sickness accordingly.
So it's more ancillary workers obviously than educative staff. That's fine.
Yeah, that's right.
Certainly that's my experience from a government point of view. I'm sure most councillors would say the same thing. And I was interested in 7.3 to 7.6, obviously, with the Child and Family Services Agency usage. I know within the scrutiny performance panel, we're regularly asking for those sorts of figures, because great concerns really if they were to increase quickly or dramatically compared with where we were and get close to where we were back in 2009. But that's another story, I guess. And it's something that we will keep an eye on in that particular scrutiny performance panel as well. So thank you for those figures being comparatively low.
Yeah. Michael?
Yes, I'd just like to confirm 6.1. You say that that's because of inflation, so the 1 million is extra in comparison to what it was in it's 6.8 for the current year, and then it was 5.7 for 21-22. So that's purely inflation.
That's a two-year
It's
period.
yeah, okay.
So
that's
the gap
2 years.
between 22 and 23 is £500,000, which proportionately
Okay.
would be about 7%. If you look at the grades of pay that agency staff coming in tend to get. So yeah, that would be in line with what we would expect pay rises to have been over the year.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Leslie Walton?
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, just a couple of comments. I'm very pleased to read a couple of things in this report. One, the proposal to use co-production with the unions, which I think is excellent, and I'm really pleased about that. The other one is generally, as Paul alluded to, the fact that you're having a really good look at existing process and reviewing it. Particularly, I noticed there seems to be a far more proactive approach in what this report says, which again I think is excellent. You know, the idea of trying to get in before somebody is seriously ill and trying to help them before that stage obviously not only helps the person, but it also benefits the council. So things like that to me are basically no-brainers, and I'm very, very pleased to see that you're taking them on. Yeah, that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walton. Councillor Jeff Jones?
Yeah, thanks for the report. Just to clarify some points here, you've actually got table 1, industrial injury. I don't seem to have seen industrial injury actually before. I've seen, shall we say, sickness levels. So is that something new that's come out of Oracle, that they can actually split the industrial injury from, shall we say, sickness, you know, with people who are with flu or whatever. And you've actually taken a snapshot up until February. And if that's the case, I'd like to have seen the comparison with regards to, you must have the details with sickness levels, if it's a separate thing. So are these industrial injury included in the previous sickness levels? Because I thought there was one figure before.
Thank you for the question. Industrial injury is not categorised as sickness absence. I think it's important to separate the distinction. Sickness absence figures do not include industrial injury days lost. They're very much no fault. They are potentially, you know, fault related days. So they are very, very separate, which is why in the report I refer to the number of days available to work across the workforce, as opposed to what is industrial injury as a percentage of all absence, because it is not categorised as sickness absence. The figures are available. As far as I'm aware, they've been available previously, and it's something that we can report on at a time when we need to.
So
Does that answer the question?
have these figures actually been reported in the past? You know, I don't seem to have seen industrial injury figures. I've seen sickness level data figures, you know, with regards to agency workers. So really, we've got one lot of industrial injury sickness levels, shall we say, and then other sickness levels. That's so the sickness levels on top of this probably would double those days.
This came about in the report as a specific question that was requested by committee as an interest to know, well, what does the number of industrial injury days look like? Hence, it's been provided in the report this time. I can't comment on whether or why it may or may not have been included previously. I've only been coming to these meetings for a little while, so it is available if you have an interest and do want to have it in the future, and it's readily reportable.
Yeah, I think one thing we've asked in this committee in the past as well is a comparison, really, shall we say, last year's figures and this year's figures to see if there's any trend. It would be nice, you know, if those figures are actually available, it'd be nice to see what last year's industrial injury figures were and this year's. I know you say they are pretty close, but on a rolling basis, it'd be nice to see if there are any changes in any areas.
That's certainly reportable. We can provide that information, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Paxton Wood-Williams.
Just quickly talking about these lost time accidents, if I may, or do we have a definition for the degree of lost time? I know when I worked in British Steel, it didn't become a lost time accident until person had been off 3 days with it, and that's when it classified as lost time. Do we break that down at all?
I'd need to check with the health and safety manager on that.
Because it's sort of minor accidents and serious accidents, if you like, and that's a breakdown. Because obviously, from that point of view, serious accident point of view, you could have an HR problem arising out of whether we work in safely or not.
I'm sure we probably separate them for anything that's RID or reportable, as opposed to not. But like I said, I just need to check the definition of that with the health and safety manager.
I do think we've seen this figures previously.
Okay.
In my mind, but you need to go back and check that. But it is important, obviously, in terms of safe working.
Thanks, Chair. Just a few points really of queries and observation. Just first one in regard to 4.5, you mentioned about the leadership group working with the unions, co-production. Is the committee likely to see the outcomes of that work? Thanks.
Yes, what we want to do is, rather than take a new sickness absence policy to the trade unions for consultation, say, here's the draft, what are your thoughts, and then try and negotiate an end position, we want to write it together in co-production. So we've already had an initial session with the trade unions where we've talked all possibilities, you know, what doesn't work currently, what would they like to see in the future, and then that has formed a basis for conversations with the leadership group around, this is the trade union feedback, where are we with principles, or do we have a consensus on some of the items, which we do now have. So there's a meeting in the diary for beginning of May, first week of May, I think, with the unions to then start to say, okay, now we need to put some words on a page. So the expectation is that this is probably going to be one of our first policies that is pretty much jointly written, so that we come out of the era of consultation once something is predetermined and we deliver it together so that we can implement it with everyone having bought in to the construction of that policy. But once that's done, and that may take weeks, may take a little bit longer, it depends on how many elements of that policy we need to finely tune and negotiate over. Yes, once it's then taken to JCC, which is our adoption body for HR policies, we then embark the rollout and the monitoring and implementation of that. So yes, at some point, I would expect it's going to be an item of interest for a number of different committees and groups.
Just on, similar to Councillor Walton, really, in regard to paragraph 5.2, obviously that's a very good positive range of support available to staff. So it's good to see a proactive view as opposed to a reactive view. So compliments on that, really. I'm sorry, in regard to 7.2, sorry, adult services, it mentions in the beginning there about workforce instability in residential care. I just wondered what's been steps have been taken to address that. Thanks.
It's a volatile area generally in terms of being able to fill vacancies and also then fill shift patterns on rotas. 24-hour provision is very difficult to be able to fill on a 100% basis. And yes, there are higher areas of sickness absence in that area because of the nature of the work. And again, you see reference the table there about industrial injury as well. So you'll see from moving and handling, that is another issue that we face in that particular department. So the reliance on agency is higher, and it's possible that we could provide further detail to you after today from the service area to give some explanation as to where the concerns lie at the moment presently, because we don't have the same level of detail as we do for, say, child and family, for example.
Just on just a couple more points, I won't be long. On 7.8, it mentions about the agency workers coming into permanent contracts or permanent vacancy. Now, is that a trend we're going to see in other areas of the council?
I mentioned earlier in my report summary that and you'll see from the table, there are still larger numbers over on the operations side. So we know that Waste, Parks and Cleansing will be taking a piece of action to do that. So yes, and the HR business partners within my service have lots of conversations and dialogue with heads of service, and agency comes up as a topic that they are regularly saying, what are you doing to just kind of minimize your usage? How are you thinking about your workforce planning? As again, I mentioned earlier, to consider the best way for you to resource your services, rather than perhaps the default being to call an agency for staff. So I anticipate us seeing in 24-25, as part of that workforce planning piece, lots of conversations with frontline operational areas around, are your rotas right, fit for purpose? Have you got the right people in the right place? And so yes, we should see that reliance decrease. And I think you can see it in children and child and family services, where I think they've got one person who's been there very long term. So it's actively discussed, yes.
Just one final one from me, be pleased to hear. Section 9 talks about the rolling out to a 5-year contract. And I presume a couple of things there really is the reduced costs in that negotiation, seeing it's a 5-year contract. And also, if you do come out of the contract earlier, are there any penalties in regard to that?
Because we haven't reached the end point of that contract situation, and given the commercial sensitivity around it, I'm not able to provide a comment today.
Okay.
That's fair. That's fair.
Thank you.
If I could come back to the point on adult service agency usage. Ness, can you help me here? Is there a scrutiny committee that deals with adult services? Yeah. So, I think we need to be minded that, that's under a level of scrutiny. I'm pleased to see it in the report because it gives us a heads up that there's potential issues there. But I think we need to be looking at what the adult services scrutiny committee are doing. Do you want to comment on that?
Not in respect to the committee, but just to advise that within adult services and in terms of the transformation, workforce is a key strand. So, not just in residential, but in domiciliary too, there are real challenges in the social services workforce. And so there are a range of measures that they're putting in place to try and address that long term, which includes growing our own, and it includes looking at working with partners to see if there are opportunities there, as well as using agency where we need to, looking at fixed term contracts, looking at other kind of changing roles slightly in order to ensure we can get people into support the services that we need. So there is a huge amount of work going on, but obviously the detail of that isn't in here, but I'm sure we can help to provide committee with that outside, and there's likely to have been reports to scrutiny on this subject, so we could provide those for information if that's where it's fine.
I'm just minded, I like to come back with the scrutiny. I've just got a couple of comments, if you can indulge me. Coming back to the time lost to industrial injury, there's quite big numbers there, and I just wondered, was the industrial injury identifying any health and safety shortcomings, which has caused the injury in the first place. So if it's an industrial injury through handling and moving, are we looking at the effectiveness of the training in health and safety? So are there any issues around health and safety training, education that's caused that?
So just to say that none has been identified as a sort of systemic issue for the council as a whole. So each directorate has a health and safety committee, and in that committee we look at any incidents that have arisen during the period, and then what action, if any, needs to be taken to ensure that that won't happen again. And if there's any wider learning for the organisation as a whole, we also have a health and safety action plan for the organisation as a whole. And so there's nothing during this year that has been flagged as an issue which across the organisation we need to deal with. There may be specific injuries here within directorates or services that have led to some kind of service improvement, but it'll be on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Thank you for that. I understand with sickness, the WLGA produce 22 local authority sickness rates for a comparator. I'm just wondering if we could see that at some point.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I provided some of that information last time in October. Unfortunately, the benchmarking data hub only goes up to 22-23. So there isn't a 23-24 submission yet.
Okay.
I have raised that with WLGA to say, when's the next collation going to be for that year? And it might be that we do 2 years because we're at the end of 23-24 as well now. So yeah, I have asked for that. Okay,
that's great. That's lovely. Thank you. I don't think I've got any other questions. Oh, yes, I have. Waste Parks Cleansing Agency, 100 agency workers across each month. That seems to be quite a significant number. Is there a reason behind that?
So the report talks around that there's always going to be a need for agency workers in that particular area, and the average number that the service area have given us is around 32 to cover those absences, annual leave, any kind of vacancies that arise. So that's the figure that they are striving to work towards, and if there is anything in excess of that or in addition of that, then that would be flagged as a query, and to see whether things are escalating in the wrong way perhaps and then need addressing, but they're working to a target of 32.
They're working to a target of 32, but it's currently 65 a month, yes. Is that?
Because the waste operations side haven't gone through the same piece of work that the waste collection side have done. So they need to finish that. And then they'll be, as a whole service area, have gone through that review piece.
It's encouraging. Okay, apologies that you had so many questions on this paper, but I mean, it's an area that is obviously of a concern to the committee, I think, you know, with the high sickness levels and the high cost of agency. And I think we need to be encouraged that you're doing a full review of the system and working in co-production as well.
And if I could just probably finish by saying, I can't promise that there'll be a magic wand that will make the number go from 12 days per FTE to 8. But the important thing is that we're taking action and we're trying to see what other ways are there that we can do to try and reduce that number. So
absolutely, and thank you for that, and thank you for that assurance that you're trying to make things better. If we can now move on then to that was an information report, although we had a good discussion around it. If we can go on to the risk management policy and framework, is Richard?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. So the report in your papers introduces the Council's revised draft risk management policy and framework. The policy and framework were reviewed after undertaking an assessment of risk management practice across Wales. It covered about a third of Welsh councils, including Cardiff, as well as quite extensive discussions at leadership team, at CMT Cabinet, and of course with the chair of the committee as well. The draft policy can be found at Appendix A on page 119, and the more detailed framework, you can see that at Appendix B on page 127. So the policy and the framework introduces a number of improvements and changes. So the key ones are the number of risk tiers. So that's been reduced so that we now have 2 tiers of risk within the risk hierarchy. So instead of having corporate, directorate and service risks, we will now just have strategic and operational risks. We've also reviewed the roles and responsibilities within the framework regarding risk management, and so those have been updated and clarified. And we've also looked at the categories within the framework, the risk categories. So they've been expanded and revised as well to make it easier to clarify the nature of risks and then to assess their potential impact and how to respond to them. We've introduced a risk appetite statement within the framework, which is about the council being clear about the degree of risk or uncertainty that it's willing to accept when looking to implement its objectives. And there is greater emphasis within the framework on seeking to improve the quality of management discussion on risk and ensuring that becomes a routine part of the management dialogue. And then finally, the policy and the framework seeks to distinguish between risks and issues so that we will have a separate issues register, which will be created to sit alongside the risk register. And other changes have included general updating and adding additional guidance where necessary. So once the framework and the policy are approved, then the work will begin to build that into our risk register application. And as is set out in paragraph 2.4, we aim to do that subject to circumstances. We aim to do that and implement it by the second quarter. Thank you, Chair.
Richard, considerable amount of work has been put into this. I'm aware of that, to update this document, which is a key document for this committee to be minded of. Do we have any questions from those out of the room? No. Any questions, David?
Hi, Richard.
Hi.
Sorry, I can't see you. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
My camera's on. That's strange.
That's right. Okay.
No, it's a problem with the
It's this end, I
Oh,
think. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. Just the definition now around strategic and operational. Just wanted your view really in regards to strategic risk, and obviously the increasing partnership working and how that may influence that particular risk. So it's a risk within a risk, if you like. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. And we've had a strategic or a corporate risk on partnership work in the past. So it is something that we are aware of, particularly as you quite rightly say, partnership working is now becoming part of what we do. So strategic risks around partnership working and within partnerships as well is definitely something which is always being reviewed as part of our risk management work.
Okay, thanks, Richard. And the other one was just an observation, and pleasing to see the notion of risk appetite, really, in view of the current climate and all the challenges and everything else. I think it's a good sign that the council is willing to take this particular definition so that it continues to be seen as a progressive authority. So it's just an observation, a positive one on that one, really. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Richard, can I just ask you to check on page 133 or page 6 of the policy, the Governance and Audit Committee's section? I think the first bullet point, you've got challenge and provide independent assurance to the members. I think you mean there the council.
Yes, I'll change that, Chair.
So if you can get that changed, that would be helpful. But similarly to comments that David's made, it's good to see the risk appetite in there and the rigour that's been applied in getting this document up and running. And obviously, members will be aware that we've got training on the risk management framework planned for June. So we'll have a better insight into how this is working. I'm assuming this is going to be rolled out quite quickly now, Ness, is that?
In terms of full implementation, I think we're looking at the second quarter. So we'll spend probably the next couple of months making sure that we've got the doing the kind of assessment of where each risk should sit and rescoring it and ensuring that we've got all of that arrangements. But in terms of reporting on it, I think we won't see a report on the new arrangements until the second quarter report.
Okay. But in the June,
you'll be trained on this framework and policy.
Okay.
And the other point to make is that we will also be looking to implement this within the in-phase system. And so that will also be an action for this financial year, so that not only are we operating it, but we're actually also then embedding it into our performance management framework.
Oh, that's great. Really positive. That's lovely. Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Ness. If we can move forward to the tracker, the audit tracker, agenda item 10. Any questions from any members on this tracker report? Just with regards to minute reference 76 on the first page, there are a couple of items there which are closed. Just to advise the committee that I've had a conversation with the Chief Auditor before the meeting today, and some of these actions here, although they closed, there's still some feedback that we're waiting on, and Simon's agreed to provide that over the next few weeks. And similarly, I think that's the same with the minute reference 72. There's a community services query that we had, so Simon can come back to us on that one. If I can turn to minute 66, Sarah Lackenby was going to try and get the priority on this VAT mandated field with Oracle, because I couldn't understand why it affects every user of the Oracle system, why that couldn't have been given priority. So I don't know where that is now. Okay. I think those are the only queries I had. If no one's got any more. Yeah. So if we can move on to the final paper in the pack, which is the Governance and Audit Committee work plan, again for information, this report. As I mentioned, we've got training coming up now in May actually, and June, on performance management framework and risk. I'm not quite sure if the dates have been fixed for those. Yes, they have. Okay. So if I can ask members if they can make every effort to attend that training, because they're both critical parts of the work. But other than that, if there are any other comments on the work programme moving forward, then we need to let Jeremy know, and he can duly make those changes. So if there are no more comments on either of those papers, nothing outside the room, Jeremy? No. Can I thank every member, those within the room and those outside the room, for attending today, and also for the challenges and the engagement again at the meeting. So I wish you all a safe journey back home.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you.